Let's forget if they're called lorries or trucks. That doesn't matter today. I want to explore the HGV scene down in Australia.
If I was to say the words Australian trucking to you, assuming you have any prior knowledge, then most likely you'd be envisioning something like this. Known
I think that is more or less the type of thing that I think of when I think of Australian HGV. Let's just call them HGVs, heavy good vehicles. That is the sort of thing I think, very much similar to the American style, long journeys, needs a lot of power. Not what we find in the UK.
Known as a road train, this behemoth of a vehicle is by far the most iconic and internationally recognizable aspect of Australia's trucking industry. However, if you were to leave the desolate outback and make your way to somewhere a bit more populated, you might be surprised to find a vast array of different trucks, or prime movers, from various corners of the globe.
See, I'm going to keep myself in small screen. See, that one on the right is the sort of one that I'm familiar with. My dad is an HGV driver. He drives lorries. He would call them lorries. But that is the style that I'm used to. Sometimes you have, behind the two front seats, you have a bed. Maybe if you're doing, have to stay somewhere at night. That is the style that I remember. I've been in them. Yeah, that's familiar to me.
Of the globe. On any given street, you can find European brands such as Scania, Volvo, or Iveco, Japanese brands like Mitsubishi, Isuzu, or UD, and American brands like Kenworth, Mack, or Peterbilt. In addition to this, you'll see both conventional and cab-over style truck cabs, both of which are best suited for different purposes.
I'm going to try and work out what the cab-over style is. What I know, as I said, I'm trying to work out why they would be better. I'm going to assume, if you think of UK roads, they're normally quite narrow, lots of tight turns. So I don't know if that is a reason. Maybe they turn better. They're better in more compact spaces. Maybe they don't have as much power. I know my dad's told me this, that obviously over here, the lorries are limited to about 51 miles an hour, whatever that is in kilometers. And they can be a pain, because if you're driving on a dual carriageway, which is basically two lanes, and you have a lorry that's driving at 50 because of the weight, and then another lorry behind that's driving at 51, they have to overtake and they have to go 1 mile an hour to overtake, to stop them having to brake, because it takes lorries so much longer to get to the speed they need to. So maybe that is a problem with the cab over ones, because they don't have as much power. Maybe.
Let's start with the conventional cab, also called a bonneted truck, which is mostly used for longer distance travel and is perfectly suited for road trains. For those of you unfamiliar with road trains, they economically connect remote Australian communities which otherwise have no way of receiving freight, as the Australian rail network mostly hugs the coastlines. There is great need for road trains in Western and Central Australia, as there is essentially no rural transportation infrastructure. Though road trains are legally allowed to operate in the states and territories of Northern Territory, Western Australia, and parts of South Australia, Queensland, and New South Wales.
You can see that's interesting, because according to this map, they've clearly cut off the more urban areas along the sea, except in WA and NT, because even in Perth it looks like you're allowed to drive road trains.
Road trains cover massive distances over rough terrain, often on unpaved and desolate roads. Kangaroos, cows, and various other animals are a major hazard for drivers in these remote areas. Hence why road train cabs feature thick bull bars on the front. Drivers, affectionately known as truckies, can be out for days to months at a time, so the extra cabin space is greatly appreciated, especially when it's the only refuge from the searing Australian sun. Conventional cabs have greater engine space than their cab-over counterparts, which allows for the installation of some absolutely massive engines, which are more than required to haul these heavy loads. There's great diversity among road train configurations, but for the most part they have 3 or more trailers in varying sizes. Given the environment of the outback, it's not uncommon for older vehicles to overheat, especially when climbing uphill. While overheating is unfortunate regardless of what kind of truck you drive, sitting on top of an overheating engine can be a little bit dicey and not to mention hot. Conventional cabs are also easier to maintain while in the bush, as accessing the engine is a simple matter of popping the bonnet as opposed to the more laborious process of tilting the whole cab.
when I see those sort of images where with the cab completely flipped over, I just, how the hell is that not completely falling over? It always makes me worried. It's also the same when I see the cab over without the trailer on the back, without it carrying any goods. It's like, that really looks like it's going to topple forwards.
This is not to say that only conventional cabs are used in road trains. American brand cabovers, which are actually produced in Australia, can be seen from time to time hauling heavy as well. Really, it's up to individual choice, but generally conventional cabs are preferred. Jumping over to the coast, the streets are teeming with cabovers of all sorts. These stubby little warriors maintain the coastal economies where the vast majority of Australians live. Though generally Australian roads tend to be fairly wide, it can be difficult for a conventional cab driver to get around in more populated areas. Cabovers also provide a greater field of view, turning radius, and are often safer for other drivers to be around, as braking distances and agility are priorities.
So I was right. I know Australian roads are definitely wider than ours on the whole, but still, you know, when you're trying to squeeze round different corners and things, it's not easy to do. I said my dad's told me, and I've been with him, and it's not easy. It's a real skill. It is a real skill to be able to drive HGVs of this sort of size. But that's really interesting that actually you know the Aussies do use both styles, but have different sort of purposes. You know, there's different reasons for using either, and actually both are needed. You know, I don't think you could get away with only having one style. That's interesting.
Usually hauling singles, or maybe doubles, cabovers are perfectly suited for Australia's denser areas and shorter distance hauls. These cabovers, most of which are from Europe and Japan, are extremely well engineered, able to find the perfect medium between efficiency and safety. People in my comments seem to agree that these European cabovers are quite comfortable and luxurious.
I have never seen a lorry like that. Every one my dad has drove is filthy, is very basic, certainly doesn't have screens like that. It doesn't have the nice leather plush seating. Where has he got this image from? Because that is not the image I have ever seen when my dad has been driving. Mad.
Often with air ride suspension built into the cab, and though it's a matter of personal opinion which cab style is better, comfort plays a huge role in a driver's life. What Australia's trucking industry does better than many areas of the world is simple. They provide you with an option as to what truck you'd like to drive. Though people can argue endlessly about which cab style is better, I think we all can agree that we'd rather have the option to choose for ourselves. Alright.
That is very diplomatic. Very diplomatic indeed. But that's interesting. As I said, I thought that all you had, even now after all this learning, all you had is the big, heavy lorries that have the big the big fronts and all the power. But you don't. You don't. You have the cab over style like we have over here, and each have their own purpose. That's interesting. It's something I didn't have a clue about. But it actually, I think I can now relate to it a little bit more because you have what we have. You're not completely different. That's really fascinating. I've been meaning to do this video for ages, and that is fascinating and really, really intriguing. Brilliant to hear. But as I said, HGV drivers, they are the lifeblood of a country. You know, the hours they do is crazy. Whether it's doing these road trains or just the normal lorry drivers who are delivering your supermarkets, all the food for there and everything like that. Or my dad, for example, would transport plant hire, as in diggers and things like that. These guys are essential, and it's great to know they have a choice in Australia. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found it as interesting as me. Make sure you like and subscribe. I am giving Pixie attention, I promise. And I'll catch you next time.